years ago, almost to the day, I had this incredible, profound, I would say, even conversation with Mike Skrypnek. We were talking on the Wisdom Speakers and Seekers podcast. It was a podcast that I had previous to Awaken and Ascend. His honesty and vulnerability and strength to share what is often hidden in leaders, the kind of struggles they face, the trauma that they hide, really struck a chord with me. And Mike is very much a mental wellness advocate for men in particular, and especially those who are leaders or held high level positions. He exudes strength and trust over vulnerability. And I wanted to rebroadcast this today on Awaken and Ascend because it really aligns with this show's mission as well. It helps us to explore the truth, to elevate consciousness, especially to inspire conscious leadership and inspire courage as well as we face these challenges. Because these kind of topics, the need for open dialogue, the need for feeling safe to actually have these kind of conversations, especially for men who, are taught from an early age, as you know, to hide that, to man up, that we want to be able to open and create more spaces for being able to share this and to see the strength in that and to bring about even stronger leadership as a result of that. And this is shifting our culture. So it's even more relevant now, I would say, especially given all the challenges that we're facing now, to be able to break the silence and really shift the culture on that. So I invite you to tune in with an open heart, and maybe you'd even like to share this episode with those who are needing that courage and support right now, because what you'll find in this conversation is truth. And it's not always pretty. Mike shares about his 10 deepest, darkest days of his life. And this episode reminds us that true leadership isn't about hiding those struggles. It's about finding strength through honesty, healing, and connection. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so you tune into this episode. Today, I am so delighted to have Mike Skrypnek here. He is a catalyst that ignites your passion to help you make a cosmic ripple. His role as a multiplier of entrepreneurial success and personal achievement extends through generations. Healing our past traumas and reforming our subconscious patterns allows us to realize unlimited worth. Mike will show you ways to gain insight needed to develop the awareness to overcome any limit, keeping you from your own personal and professional success. Mike is an international bestseller of 9 books, a keynote speaker, a men's mental health advocate, and sought-after business strategist who has shared his insights and wisdom with thousands of passionate, purpose-driven entrepreneurs, business leaders, and executives. Mike lives, loves, and adventures with his wife, Sherry, and their 2 young adult children, Madison and Cohen, in the beautiful sea-to-sky corridor of British Columbia in Canada. You can find them skiing, snowboarding, hiking, mountain biking, paddleboarding, and more in the mountains and rivers and ocean just minutes from home in one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I get to share that too in Victoria, BC. So welcome, Mike. I am so honored to have you here and sharing your story of unlimited worth. Thank you for being here.
I feel privileged. I'm very happy to be here, Jennifer. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Mike, you've written 9 best-selling books, and I'm curious what inspired you on that role? What ignited your passion to begin writing, and what was the message that you were really trying to get out there?
The first book, I swore off ever writing another book 8 books later. So, the very first one was a process of trying to gain credibility in a marketplace that I truly wanted to help. It was in the philanthropic space, and I was a financial advisor, and that's a wolf in the hen house kind of moment for most charities. They don't enjoy their experiences with people like my peer group at the time. And so I wanted to demonstrate that I was there to help and did the investigation needed to, I gained the attention of the board of directors, who were ultimately the people who would say yes or no to whether or not I could serve that charity and connect them with their donors. So that was the beginning of what ended up being, 8 more books after that. And, each step along the way, it was often where I wanted to demonstrate a knowledge base, gain a knowledge base for myself, and connect with a marketplace, if you will. It was often in business. And now, I'm looking at my 9th book, and all the other books were really designed in a certain way. And this one is different. And, that's what's exciting about this.
Yeah. So what is different about this one, Mike?
Well, there's so many things that are different. But just on the surface, it's a vastly more personal tale that shares the journey that I've gone through personally, expresses men that I've also spoken with that have shared experience, and kind of synthesizes what that experience and what that journey looks like. And ultimately, the book is unlimited worth, and it's lessons of healing from childhood trauma, finding happiness, love, and success for male leaders.
I love that. There's so much that can be hidden in underneath the surface of male leaders. There's this projection of someone really confident, some might even say arrogant in some cases, that you want to follow, you want to receive direction from. But quite often there's some pain and there's suffering and hidden traumas that could be like from our own childhood or from generations past that we carry into that. Have you had your own story, Mike, where you've experienced some sort of suffering or trauma in your life?
I do. And, first, let me say that, this book and this exercise is for all men, okay, and, the families who love them. One thing that I've always sought in the business that I do, in the impacts that I attempt to have in this world, and, that cosmic ripple is the premise that one good splash will create a ripple that, goes through generations. And it's all about leverage. And even when I was helping people guide their philanthropy, it was always about getting the most, turning a $5,000 gift into a $500,000 gift. How do you do that? Right. And so when I focus on leaders, what I'm really saying is I want to get the attention of the people in the C-suite, in the boardroom, the leaders of sports and pro sports and athletics that people look up to in the locker room, and also the green room, which is the entertainment industry. And when you deal with the leaders, there's a lot of good reasons for that. And I will share that. And you have the ability to set the tone, create the culture, and affect literally hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of other people, other men and other people. And that's because these leaders have the ability to guide the outcomes of their employees, their stakeholders, and their customers.
Yes.
And so for me, when I consider where is my best point of leverage, I look at my repertoire of work, and that is 20 years in the financial services industry, working with, and then subsequently working with entrepreneurs and business owners. So the comfort in the business space at the executive level is something very natural for me. So conversations with those people, especially on important things like this topic, begin to be something that happens easily. And so my experience, of course, was there I was after 18 months of start and stop in the middle of this pandemic that we just lived through. And I couldn't restart my business in a way that could give me predictable traction. I had been serving clients for so long and so intensely while they struggled trying to figure out their businesses. And I was very isolated. And, I got to this point with a contract that just ended up ending. It was, just stopped, that was it. I thought the thing was going to be much larger. For whatever reasons, it just didn't work out. And then I was sitting looking at my life going, my business is, I'm telling people how to run their businesses and I have no business. And I felt hopeless and worthless and useless at that moment. And in any other point in my life, I've been able to navigate those waters quickly, remedy my emotional state, find the positives, and move on. And in this particular case, I went diving deep into the darkness of depression. And it was 10 days, the worst 10 days of my life in terms of my emotional state. And I would say it because it wasn't that I felt bad. I was descending into something I had no control of, and it was taking me to places of darkness that I considered ending my life on a daily basis on my daily walk by a local river. And that was just happened to be bad weather and it was raging. And I thought, well, what if I just toss myself in and end it? You know, my life would be all my stresses. There's no financial stress, no business. Like I can just end it, put a bow on this, and my family can have the insurance and they'll be good for the rest of their lives. And of course, that's not a good option. And, you know, at day 10, I was, you know, scared out of my wits that I was in that moment. My wife had been commuting to work and coming back, wondering if I was going to be there. And she reflected that with me. And I had to dig out. And so I reached out for help with a good friend of mine, and she, you know, threw me that lifeline. And she's the kind of relationship though, where, you know, she threw me the love that I needed, but also whacked me over the head with the life preserver. Like, her love is tough, you know, and we have that relationship. And it was what I needed to change course. But, you know, holding back from ending my life was a pretty simple process, as much as I actually went as far as writing down the pros and cons. And that was, you know, I looked at my family and, you know, my love for my family and their strength and support. I just couldn't do that to them. It'd be a selfish act. I mean, what more selfish act would it be for me I couldn't deal with my trauma at the time. So I end my life and then change their lives forever. I mean, this is not fair, right? It wasn't the right thing to do. It was so selfish. And then the next thing for me was I'm an optimist. I actually, even the darkest moment, I still want to know what's going to happen tomorrow. You know, I still want to know, you know, if the light in the tunnel is the train or the sunshine. You know, I'm always that guy. And so those things started to help me, you know, come out of this. But once you step out, I was still like, there was a disaster happening. My business was nowhere. I was still an emotional wreck and I needed to fix some things. I never wanted to be back there. So I took the step to say, well, if I never want to repeat all the things that I might have been repeating that I think are part of this challenge that I'm experienced today, and I never want to be in that dark place, what do I have to do? And there was kind of an elephant in the room. You know, there was, what is the one thing I never dealt with? And now 40 years later, it's probably the one thing that's just about killed me. And it really was something. I experienced sexual trauma, sexual abuse at age 11. And that in particular, that event set a subconscious course of direction in a child that stuck with me my entire life. And at 51 at the time, there I was having to deal with it. And so process of healing.
What was that process of healing, Mike? Once you discovered what was going on, what was there, what was coming up for the surface for you, how were you able to move through that? What allowed the healing to occur?
There's many things, and I think there's some key elements, and this is part of my message to other men, is because here I am in a public forum talking about it.
Yes.
And every day I'm in a public forum on stage or in podcasts or through my book talking about this openly and plainly. But that doesn't have to be everyone's situation. What it did require, though, is speaking openly and fully. My wife always knew, but she never thought I had a challenge, you know? And and reflecting, I said, you know, Sherry, this is all connected and I have to deal with this. And, you know, maybe here's a few more details about that experience that 11-year-old boy had that maybe will be helpful. And so I spoke with someone I loved and trusted. I love and trust more, you know, and will have that space for me, that empathy and compassion. And then the next person that I arranged to speak with, even though I did speak with a professional on the way out, she gave me that life preserver, but I needed to speak with a person who could do treatment. And what I did know, because it's not like I didn't think about my trauma all my life, like every day I was thinking it. So for years I'd been trying to like come to terms with what it meant in my life, but I was wandering around without a guide, right? So it was just empty exploration. So I needed a guide. I needed a trusted therapist. And so I sourced out someone who did trauma therapy, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and worked heavily in that space, because this was the emotions of trauma were connected to something. And emotions are the things that make us do good, bad. They drive our actions, right? We don't know what's going on subconsciously, so we just instinctually have things that happen and we do things, but it's the emotions that make us make decisions. Like that's where we believe we have our free will, our choice. It's all about how do we feel about it. Okay, well, I feel this. Well, our gut's telling us something very different. We have very different wiring. So what I knew logically but hadn't experienced until I engaged a professional who was an expert in this, and that is, I understood that EMDR was a good way to reduce the impact of trauma. It's a proven technique and therapy that's been used and is heavily used with post-traumatic stress. And I said, okay, well, that's going to help. And then let's find out what else. And through the process, what I learned, and this is where, this is the crux of my book, is I learned that everything, not just some things, everything was connected to the trauma I had experienced. And that was, for me, it was an invasive, terrible trauma, but it was also one of the few, if any, major traumas in my childhood. So it kind of boiled down to that moment, or those moments, right? And what happens in our childhood brain is, as we have a developing brain, and we're talking from in the womb until your brain stops really forming, if you will, in your early 20s, traumas embed reaction. And that reaction is, we all have experiences. So good experiences, we do more of it, right? We tend to go where areas that we get positive reinforcement. That's part of our learning. We are constantly sensory learning all this stuff, and it's being processed. When we have trauma, we have negative experiences, they are received in the form of trauma. And my trauma created a response in my brain that said, whatever you do, protect this kid, right? So the hardwiring that goes into that moment is protect the life of this organism so they can reproduce somewhere down the line, right? Like that's kind of at a fundamental level. And so what was one of the key elements? Well, for me, the key protection was, do not trust the good men in the community, the pillar of the community. It was the pillar of our community that raped me, right? So we have the ex-Air Force, World War II decorated pilot. We have the husband of my school principal. We have he was the choir leader, the church leader, the Boy Scout leader, like a good looking, strapping 6-foot+ guy who every parent put their trust in and gave their boys over. And methodically for years, he was raping them, right? And what I learned, but I never didn't understand it at the time, or quite frankly, until recently, was that my mechanism was avoid at all costs being in a situation where the perceived good man in the room was in the room. So never work with them, never do anything with them, stay away from them. And so subconsciously, I either began repelling them or choosing to avoid them, which meant siding or doing business. And I was in the business community for a long time. So siding with men who you could see their flaws. And, because I could see it. Like if your knives are out, I can see them coming. If they're hidden behind your back, I don't know. I don't trust you. And, maybe there's no knife there. And so my hardwiring was avoid anyone that you can't see anything, right? The challenge, of course, is I ended up working or siding with or doing business with or aligning with men who had flaws, and consistently in good and bad times, in really great times, men with flaws, maybe their greed bone is bigger than others and they mess things up. Or maybe they're in negative times, their stresses compound and they create an explosion of their business or whatever, right? So I was always close enough to those situations that when it blew up for them, it always hurt me. And there was a restart or a change of whatever. Like there was always loss of some sort. And I couldn't put my finger on it. I just thought I was picking bad people. But I didn't have a choice in how I picked those and how I was repelling good people from me.
Amazing. And Mike, in the beginning of all of that too, you spoke about these leaders and being human and what was there and gathering the skills that you had as you were writing your different books. And you're right, along the journey, we gather our skills and our abilities, and then we start to tap into our potency, which I can see that's what's happened for you. And then, the more we polarize that, the more we can amplify that, and getting really focused into that, and then recognizing what happened in your past and how that changed the course of how you perceived the world and perceived leaders in particular pillars of the community, and created that story and the environments and situations that are around you and how you can navigate those was a way too of finding the message in that mess, right? And now you're talking about unlimited worth. And what does that really mean to experience unlimited worth? Can you share more about that?
The starting point, and this is kind of great. Like my therapist has quoted this phrase, emotional time travel.
I like that.
And I love it. And what it really does is, the effect of going through therapy that is effective, basically positions you wherever you are today. So me as the 51-year-old man at the time, with the child the day before the trauma occurred. Right. And so when I look back to that child, that 11 and a few months old child, the world was my oyster. My parents were just, having me assessed for the gifted school. They were, I was MVP of the teams. I was this kid who was on a trajectory that had basically unlimited options in my life, right? And I felt that, and that's the child within me. And, the trauma occurred, and I didn't suppress all of that. I'm still a driven human being. And this is where leaders, I think the real comment for leaders is that it was, my resilience for that might have also helped fire that up, but I was always that guy. I was going to be that guy one way or the other. It's just now my instincts were wired differently than a healthy wiring, right? And so I look at, going fast forward to 51-year-old man who's considering, taking his own life. And at the time I was worthless. I felt useless, good. And every time I tried to rise to my potential, I was limited. And the book, I wanted to show that the other side, and, there is definitely a duration effect. If you've been assaulted and abused, or you've had sustained over long periods of time in your life, it doesn't just happen quickly that you can resurrect yourself out of this. As healing isn't an overnight thing. For me, I was fortunate that these were isolated moments, and I was able to get maybe a quicker path to it. But I've been logically thinking about this for years. So maybe it was just, I've been doing my own therapy, but without therapy. And so where I was then is on the other side, I went, wow, I feel amazing. And suddenly there was an energy about me, a difference that people automatically through, and I have to say through Zoom, because that's the bulk of the communication I was doing, just said, you're different. I noticed something different about you. What's changed about you? You look different, you sound different, you're talking differently. And that was under the surface, and now it was visible. And so what I realized is it just uncapped everything. I was like, now I had unlimited. And one of the big things that we need to understand when we are victims, and I hate the word victim, so I'm not going to use it. So when we've experienced negative trauma and someone has taken something from us, we feel worthless, and we lack trust. And knowing that you can trust that you'll be fine and you'll be okay. I'm not going to ever be in that situation again in my life. I'll be perfectly fine. No one can dupe me in that same way. No one will trick me into a place like that again. And so I'm worth everything. I've got value, and I trust that I'll be okay. So that's where unlimited worth comes from. And then I asked a bunch of other leaders, business people, and I said, I know that you've gone through some things and you've gone through treatment and therapy. What's your story? They all had the same story.
Wow.
The how everything was connected, how there were these underlying things that they didn't see in their subconscious and that was playing out in their life over and over and over again. How these emotions all of a sudden that they experienced because of those things playing out would make them do, things that weren't healthy or positive for their life, all the way from addiction to just bad business decisions and bad relationship decisions. And then on the other side of their healing experience, they had all this revelation that none of it was connected anymore. And so if EMDR has any incredible, what I call miraculous effect, and that is disconnecting the emotional response from the underlying subconscious action. And that's my book entirely, is about the patterns, the behavior of the subconscious that drives us, whether we think we have will or not, and then the emotions that are connected. And after healing or going through healing, they begin to disconnect. And so now I'm happy or sad, and it comes and go. It's fleeting. It doesn't come from some deeper place. It just exists. And that's what people who haven't been through trauma enjoy. People who have healed enjoy, that these emotions just happen. People, you always wonder, like, how come it always seems easier for that person? Because they don't have this deep subconscious connection to some of these patterns.
Yes.
And so that's the exploration of all of this, is that I wanted to show that this is the true experience of men on the other side. And that you're not alone. The phrase "you're not alone." I'll tell you what, everyone walking through the path always feels alone. So you can tell them all, you're not alone, but they're all going to go, this is my thing.
Yeah.
It's not. The bigger lesson is all the risks. You asked about leaders. So leaders won't talk. And why leaders? There's a bandwidth of humanity that, and I don't want to, it's not a socioeconomic thing, but middle class, let's say middle class, right?
Okay.
Just middle bandwidth. When the wheels come off our lives, when we're in that bandwidth, we don't pay bills, we lose our, everything is obvious. So our community and our families start to go, hey, you got a problem, right? Like, you got to address this because you don't have a job. You want, none of that. Successful leaders or perceived successes in our community, and a lot of men are who have had trauma because they rise above, right?
Yes.
They'll never show you. They've got money, they have buffer, they have what looks like success, and they have the title, all of this stuff that helps create this buffer, so they never have to share their secret. And then, of course, they've worked so hard to do that, and our cultural upbringing as men say, it's about dominance, it's about money, it's about violence, it's about dominance over women, it's about sex, it's about, gaining things and competition. And so if you say, well, I've got a weakness, I was hurt. And for men with sexual abuse, it's even more of a intrusive experience, and that you're even vulnerable, that someone did something to you that there's no way they would get away with it in common culture, but that's not true. Traumas happen like that. All of a sudden you go, well, I can't tell anybody. What? I'm the CEO of a company. We've got 10,000 employees. What will my stakeholders think? And then there's misgivings about what it means to go through treatment. Like a lot of leaders who've had trauma, who've done good and bad things in their lives, feel that there's a confessional moment. And we don't have to live, you don't have to confess every sin you've ever done. You have to just talk about the one thing that might have been the keystone of all of this for you. And you don't have to talk about it with the public, you know?
And then you really develop the capacity to be able to be strong and vulnerable at the same time, and trust the support that surrounds you, and how actually more powerful your message and your presence and your expression in the world can be, and how you can uplift humanity through that and cultivate conscious leadership. And I loved when you were talking about releasing the emotions, and that we are multisensory beings having these multidimensional lives. We're not just any one thing, and taking the world in through any one sense. Like, there's this whole array and spectrum. We are a continuation of life, but releasing the emotional attachments to the person or situation, and having that something inside you that was purpose driven, like you said earlier, even in your darkest moment, you still wanted to know what was happening tomorrow. There was still a little bit of light, a little bit of curiosity. And that's the purpose that drives us. And harnessing that, we get to continue. And so what makes you so passionate about, in particular, helping those purpose-driven entrepreneurs?
I've always been of the inclination to want to help. I mean, when I was that 11-year-old boy prior, I wanted to be a doctor. I always wanted to be a physician. And then the institutional confines were kind of my excuse not to be. Like, I didn't want to be in school. I didn't want to live by the rules, and I want to be under the man, And so I took shortcuts to have some exposure, phys ed degree, worked in athletic therapy, did the rehabilitation work with pro athletes. Like, that was a path, but it was just a cheat to avoid going into the institution of medical school, because institutions for me felt like another place I could get victimized. But I didn't know any of that. Like, it was just happening. And then in business, in striving, to combine, what now today, like, how does it help? Right? You start go, well, if I'm a leader and I perceive the risk too great to show vulnerabilities. I just wrote a blog on this yesterday, and I was messing around with the idea, keep talking about, it's good to be vulnerable. And the reality is that once you get to a point of trust that you'll be okay, be honest about your personal challenges, your traumas, and what you, and once you've exposed that, all of a sudden, all these perceived risks aren't really risks anymore, because people love you more, they accept you more, and people who don't really segment themselves out of your life. Really, it's pretty quick. And what I've learned is that what you perceive to be a vulnerability, once you get there, is no longer a vulnerability. I don't know if it's a power, but I view it as an opportunity. And so my vulnerability, like, people say, well, thank you for being so vulnerable. And at this moment, none of it feels like I'm being vulnerable. The only time I felt like it was a vulnerability was when I perceived that the risk of sharing was the vulnerability. I don't know if it's kind of this moment where there's a cause and effect to it. And now that it's out in the open, I don't feel any vulnerability at all.
No. And you don't have those emotional attachments either, because they've been disconnected. Totally. We just unplug from all of that trauma and drama, right?
Right, trauma and drama.
From those power sources, unplug it, plug it into a better power source. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. So, for someone, so for me, prior to treatment, prior to going through this, it would always be a vulnerability. Because the moment I shared, I would be worried that I wouldn't be valued, trusted, I couldn't trust, I'd be worthless, all these other things, the shame, the guilt, all of these core emotions would still be connected, even if I was out in public with it. So it didn't help. Like, I told my wife back in, the first few months of our relationship, but it didn't do anything to help me through that. And in fact, her experience was not trauma-based in life. And so she didn't understand that maybe it would be connected, and maybe we didn't have the information back then. And, now she gets it, and now we all get it. And what I want to share is when you, because men will bury this, the average years is like 25 years. So a man will bury their childhood abuse of whatever it is, physical, sexual, whatever nature, for 25 years on average, 24 or 25 years. Well, that's not really healthy. A lot of stuff happens in our lives.
It's a life sentence.
It's a life
25
sentence.
years is a life sentence. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting point. Sorry, I'm going to bounce around a bit here. People ask me, and I know it's a personal, empathetic response to say, I'm so sorry to hear that you were victimized in that way, like somebody assaulted you, yeah. And without a doubt, on a surface, if you just look at it, it was a horrific act. And what was worse, it was a premeditated horrific act that was repeated, not with me, but with lots of boys, right? And so that makes it horrific. But really, it wasn't the worst thing. The worst thing was that my brain did everything in its power to protect that kid.
Yes.
And wired in some real core elements that would be very effective in those circumstances or in a life or death circumstance for me going forward. They would save my bacon. But in regular society, dealing and navigating in just everyday life, where we're not threatened, where our lives are not threatened, and we don't have to fight for survival, those hardwired patterns just they aren't congruent. And so that's where the problem was for me. And there were a lot of other underlying subconscious patterns that got built in with this, but that was the one is the biggest one, is because that changed my outcomes all the time. Yeah. And it led me, to play smaller, right? I love the being in front. I'll put everybody's weight on my shoulders and go out in front, right? Happy to do that. You don't have to get a therapist, get someone you love and trust, share that with them. That's all you need to do. But I'll go out there and start breaking down those doors. I'm happy to do that. Before, I wanted to be just big enough, just below vice president, not president, not CEO. That role suited me well. And the reason is because if I was in the absolute brightest light, my secret would be revealed. Right. And then all would be lost. That was my perception. And that's the perception of leaders. Their secret will be revealed. Their hidden weaknesses will be revealed, and they'll be taken advantage of. Competition will take what's theirs. They will be thought lesser of. All of these things that we protect,
stories that we tell ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's all the stories we tell ourselves, because I have never felt better, more trusted, more trusting, more worthy, and more valuable than I do today with all of this out in the open.
Yes.
And so, the lesson is obviously that, what you don't want to define you is going to define you every day of your life anyways. And the worst thing about childhood trauma, in particular abusive trauma, is it will kill you eventually. Like, we're all in the path to, the mortuary at some point in our lives, but this will kill you faster. And it's killing men. 4 out of 5 suicides between 40 and 60-year-old people are men today.
Wow.
Men are 30, the rise in depression in men, and from StatsCan since 2018 in Canada alone is 30% higher incident rates of reported depression, right? The top 8, so the suicide is the 8th leading cause of death of men in Canada, right? But the other 7 is heart rate, cardiopulmonary disease, cancer, other vascular diseases, right? Heart attacks. What do you think causes all that stuff? One of the biggest contributing factor is stress, anxiety, lack of sleep, poor eating, and probably alcohol, right? And guess what all of those are a product of? Not being able to deal with your trauma or emotional work, stress, right? Yes. And so the common factors of all the things that kill us right now, men in particular, and we're dying at a rate that's disproportionate to women, from an age and a percentage ways, is we can fix this stuff.
Yes.
It's related.
Yes. And by fixing, it's bringing back into balance, realigning with who
Yeah.
you truly are. And it may be oversimplified to say this and wrap our heads around how the inner work makes the outer work effortless. Your story that you shared today, not your story, your life experiences really demonstrate what that means, right? When life seemed chaotic and tumultuous, unmanageable, and you didn't even want to live it anymore, those thoughts were going through your head. And then to dive in to that inner work. And now that you have, the outer work has become effortless because you're detached from those emotional baggages, and you didn't not forgetting it's still a part of who you are, what your experiences, what's happened to you. But now you can lead from the front, right? And you can stand up and go beyond that edge, out of that comfort zone into your growth zone, and really deepen and get to your true passion. And the passion, the way I see it, when you break up the word, is pass I on. And that I is your soul's expression of who you are and what you're meant to express here and pass on in this lifetime. And through your books and through your speaking and through your leading and just authentic sharing, you're
Mm.
passing on this unlimited worth. And Mike, I'm so grateful for everything that you've shared around that. And I know there's still a lot more. You have 9 books about it. You continue to speak on it. So how can people find out more about you and what you've written and what you've spoken about and continue to do? How can they connect?
Well, I'm hoping at some point my name and men's mental wellness trauma will be ubiquitous, not synonymous, ubiquitous. At
Mm-hmm.
some point, if you're thinking about that, you'll find me. But right now, MikeSkrypnek.com is my website. So just / unlimited worth project, unlimited worth podcast, unlimited worth book. You'll be able to find my book on Amazon in a few weeks once it's published and launched and ready to go. That's where you'll find me. I'm, fortunate enough to have a story that might be interesting enough for people like you, Jennifer, to share on podcasts. I'm recording 1 or 2 a week now, and I host my own. So without a doubt, we're going to make an impact in order to change the world so boys become better men.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting with the leaders of today to help them become better men, become the good men they always have been, and create a culture and an environment that is giving the space for those other men to realize their unlimited worth.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so well said. Is there anything else that you would like to say, to share, to bring that message forth today, Mike?
Just a couple of key things.
Mm-hmm.
The first and most important is you have to break your silence, and you have to do it today. That's it. Break your silence. And what does that look like? First of all, acknowledge to yourself that everything is connected to whatever that trauma might have been. It is. You may not think it. You might think you're a success. You haven't had treatment. It ain't fixed. So you got to go and say it's connected. Talk to someone you love and trust and share that with them. You might be surprised at how many other people you end up telling, but start there. And then find a professional, especially if it's trauma-based from childhood, who specializes in EMDR and talk therapy. Like, there's a combination. They don't just strictly stay with EMDR. There's a therapy side to it as well. That's all, that 100% better the next day. And then you get to be a little bit better every time, right? So immediately you'll feel better and you'll get better over time, bit by bit, until, you begin to feel whole. And that's a great word as opposed to healing.
Yes.
I feel whole today. I feel like, I've done that emotional time travel back to that great kid.
Amazing. Amazing. Fantastic, Mike. This has been such a true experience of life, and how we walk this journey not alone, although it can certainly feel that way. But as Ram Dass said, we are all just walking each other home. And so I'm so grateful that we were able to come together today and have this conversation and that you are here today, a lot different from when you were
Thank
in that
you.
moment. And, the decisions that change the whole trajectory of our lives. How do we want to live it? And break the silence. Do that now. And connect with Mike. I'm going to have all those links in the show notes and the video description below so that you can easily connect to that. For all of you who have been listening and watching, I thank you so very much for being here, and I hope you'll join us again next week. Mike, it's been such an honor having you here. So thank you again for sharing with us so openly. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Jennifer. I really, really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. And I honor each and every one of you, and we'll see you again next time. Bye for now.